For this section of the skill builder, we're going to cover swinging soft tackles.
That's a big bro.
This is a crazy technique. It's a great way to cover water, a fun way to cover fish that are being really fussy. So if you're on a picky tailwater like we are today, sometimes when you get lots of heads up and you're having a hard time getting them to eat a dry, this could be the kryptonite for those fish where you still sting a few of them. So rigging wise, I've got a softer action 4 weight. This is a Sage R8 Classic and the 8.5 4. Doesn't have to be this rod, could be a 9-footer, could be a 3 weight, could even be a 5 weight for that matter. I would argue that softer action, medium fast action rods lend themselves to this technique in particular. We want a little tippet protection and so on. Otherwise, I've just got a 4-weight floating line, sporting one of the old OG Lamps and Lightspeed reels. That's an oldie. I've attached 8-foot leader, tapered to 3X, then I added some 5X tippet to it. I've got a 3-fly rig on top. I have a little soft tackle that's a blueing olive. In the middle, I have a small midge. And then because the fish aren't rising much at the moment, I've got a little bead head. It's just a little bluing olive looking fly with some CDC soft tackle. This one's going to kind of anchor my rig down in the current a little bit. We've seen a couple fish come up, but not as many as we'd hoped. So what I'm going to do is start with this with the weighted rig, hopefully get my flies down just a little bit. If we start seeing more rises and the fish start moving up in the water column, I would eliminate the weighted fly and possibly just fish 2 or maybe 3 unweighted soft tackles. Otherwise, I'm going to wade upstream. This is a down or down and across type of technique, so I'm going to go to the top of this little run and work my way through it and try and talk my way through it as well. It's pretty shallow where I'm standing, as you can see, but maybe 2.5 rod lengths away, there's a little bit of a gut and there's a shelf that extends downstream of me here. So the first thing I need to do is get flies in the water, get them wet, and then pull off enough line to try and cover some water. So I like to pull all the line I need off first. I'm going to check my back cast here. In this case, I might do a fair bit of roll casting. I'm going to send the flies across, and what we're going to do is a lot of mending. Then we're just going to let the flies swing through the drift. We're going to keep them tight. And the real variations to this technique are how fast you move the flies. So if I get them across and I mend here, I feed a little bit of line, mend again. My flies are sinking all this time. Now they're starting to move as I introduce drag and they start swinging across the current. If I mend to my left, it will slow down their swing. If I mend to the right, it will speed up the swing. Let's keep covering here, all the way across. Quick mend, one more mend, letting the flies get down a little now. I'm going to try a couple more mends during the drift here. Once it starts to speed up, slowing them down a little, swinging them across current. And in this case, I'm just going to feel eats. You might sometimes also see the fly line tighten up, so it's a good idea to keep an eye on the tip of your fly line. The fly line also will tell you whether or not you're getting a nice slow swing or a faster swing. So from this position, they're moving across pretty quick. If I mend, it will slow it down a bit. Now you can see they're moving slower. Now they're speeding up. Slow them down. The other hacks to this is when it gets straight down below you, you can either lift and drop, or move the rod tip side to side. And that makes the soft tackles at the end of the drift kind of move up, slide down, move up, slide down. If there's a fish hanging there, that will sometimes induce a strike, or if you had a following fish across the water, sometimes that will get them to seal the deal at the very end of your swing. One thing I should mention is that there's a couple different schools of thought on setting the hook. There's also a couple different schools of thought on how you should hold your rod. Some people like swinging soft tackles with a very high rod, usually their rod setting. Others like to have a much lower rod. I don't like it on the water, but I like it just slightly off. Sometimes if you can't see the tip of your line, if you're fishing further away than I am right now, you can watch for that little droopy swing tip off the end of the rod tip to lift and tighten all of a sudden when you get an eat. Some people will say let the fish eat it. Don't set the hook at all. Others will tell you to set the hook. I'm kind of a play it by ear on my wet fly swings. If they're really pummeling it, you often don't need to do anything. The one other hack that people will do is have a small loop of line like this between their reel and their hand, and have the pinch here be very, very light, so that if a fish eats, it will soak up that little slack and allow them to get the fly in before pulling it directly out of their mouth. It is a very tight line type of technique. So with really light tippets especially, you'll be prone to breaking fish off if you're strip setting or pulling really hard. I would suggest if you're gonna rod set, turn to the side so that you're pulling not straight out of their mouth but into the corner of their mouth, and try and use the softness of the tip of your rod to cushion your tippet. So much like streamer fishing, this isn't usually a technique where you just stay in one place for very long. So I'm gonna kind of use this same amount of line, take a couple of steps, and now I'm basically covering some fresh water. I can still swing across. This first one I'll do no mends. Just see what happens here. See if we can get a grab. It's going pretty slow at the end of the swing anyway. It's going a little faster than I would like at the beginning. So I might throw a mend or two early on this next swing. Now you can see it's kind of eaten up most of my slack about now, so I'm going to throw another mend at it. Going pretty good. Now starting to speed up. Slow it down one more time. Then I can also dictate at the end of the swing. I can swing my rod out to the side to speed it up a little if I need, or point it right at it to slow it down a bit. One other technique that I forgot to mention, a lot of people also like to just do instead of setting the hook, instead of having the line slip, some people just set their drag to where if the fish eats it, it takes a little bit of line, but it doesn't, it's not so tight that it's gonna break the fish off. So if a fish were to take my fly now, it could pull a little bit of line off my reel and just not hold the line at all. That's one other common technique for setting the hook with the wets. All right, I'm gonna slide down a couple more steps. Kind of covered most of this drop off. Now let's get to some of the deeper water and see if we can find some fish in the depths. See if I can get them down a little bit this time. I'm going to pull off some extra line. Get my flies a bit deeper. A lot of what I'm looking for is my fly line angle, my fly line tip. Oh, there's one. All right, he came tight. I did the technique of just letting the fish get onto the reel rather than setting the hook. I just let him get tight. One thing that does happen with this technique, I'm going to try not to jinx myself here, but all of the angles are bad with this technique. Your hooking angle is bad. Playing fish downstream of your position, not ideal. Luckily this one played along with us, came to the net. Let's find out which fly it ate. All right, this little brownie played along. Fun little fish, swinging the wets. The one thing I did that was a little bit different there was I extended line. I threw extra mends to let my rig get a little deeper, and he did end up eating my point fly. So we'll continue working through this and see if we can find any more. I'll just continue talking through what I'm seeing, what I'm thinking I'm doing, what I'm trying to do with my flies, and so on. See if we can find another fish. Flies should be getting down nicely now. Now they're coming tight, starting to swing. I actually like the angle I've got. They're moving left to right very, very slowly. Again, if I wanted to speed it up, I would mend to my right. If I wanted to slow it down, I would mend to my left. There was a bump. I just had one. There he is. Oh, did he stay on there? I think he's little, but he stayed on there. Yeah, he did. Oh, he's about the same as the last. Like I said, I like that little angle. It's a bit of a skill to learn to watch the fly line and the speed and the angles of the fly line. But if you spend a little bit of time doing that, nice. Jumping brown. They're warming up with this spring weather. Pop him in the net. All right, he's once again on my point fly, so that's proof they are still deepest eating the deepest fly. I have 2 other flies on the rig that are higher in the column. Let's get him back in here. But as I was saying, there is still a little bit of skill as far as watching the fly line tip. If the fly line has too much curve, it's moving really fast. And in some cases, the fish might actually like that. Let's say there's a caddis hatch where there's a lot of bugs. They're active swimmers, they're moving quickly. Sometimes moving stuff across the run is very, very productive. But more often than not, moving the flies, but moving them very slowly is key to the technique. All right, I've got two fish on my point fly, nothing on the other 2. Next, my top fly looks most like my point fly, so I'm going to switch my top and middle fly just to see if I can get one to eat that middle fly. All right, just finished moving my flies. So one thing we showed but I didn't talk about very well is that the flies are on droppers. I favor that to tying them in line. It allows them to swim better. And in most cases, in bigger river especially, I think I would suggest having the flies more like 3 feet apart, 2.5 feet apart at least, instead of this close. But because I'm trying to get them down a little, I kept my point fly pretty close. The other 2, that one's probably 20 inches apart, maybe 21, 22. But let's get back in here, pull some line back off. I've actually already exceeded my expectations since there are not very many fish working, one every 10-15 minutes anyway. I don't have high expectations for big numbers of fish with this. If there were 15, 12, 20, whatever heads popping up here or there, I would have higher hopes for landing quite a few more fish with the technique. For me, it's just a fun technique to do. It is a fun one also when the fish are being really picky in flat water especially. You can fish from far away. The other hack, and I mentioned this already briefly, but when you're getting fish that are porpoising, eating midges, eating mayflies, eating caddis in evenings where they're breaking the surface but they're not actually rising for adults, that's where I think this technique actually really shines. The other time that it's quite productive is just covering lots and lots of water in a much larger river than this, in big long glides where you just need to kind of find some fish. Sometimes just swinging a team of wets across a big long glide or a big long pool can be very effective. Allows you to cover water quickly. Where to nymph it or to throw a dry dropper or something, you'd have to cover a lot of water, a lot of casts, do a lot of moving. With this, you just take a couple of steps, feed some line. You can fish it short, you can fish it long. I'm in the deepest part of the run now. I have a feeling that my flies are just not getting to depth. Maybe we'll find a couple more fish to the right as it shallows out on the shelf, or as the pool tails out and gets shallower at the back end here. So I'm going to keep moving. And with this technique, most people I know that spend a lot of time doing this, and I'm not one that does spend a lot of time doing this, but most people would argue that with this technique, your hookup ratio compared to eat ratio is fairly low, and that has been my experience also. I did just have one eat there in the tail out, not getting as deep, so I might try that a couple more times. Not letting the flies drift as long, so I'm keeping them a little higher in the column, so a little bit more of a straight cast instead of the immediate slack, then getting tight. Oh, there was a bump. There he was again. Oh, there he was. For a second. Oh, he came back. He came back. I dropped the flies. I lost him for a second. I dropped the flies back in and he came back for more. I don't know if he's on the same fly or he ate one of my others, but he zonked it, started taking off. You probably heard the reel scream a couple of times. Oh, I have 2 on there. That's what happened. I have 2. We'll see if I keep 2. I have pretty light tippet. I probably won't end up with 2, but they're still on there for now. I might actually have 3. I have 3 fish on there. All right, I have 3 fish on at the moment. Let's see if we can figure out how to make this happen. Oh, one of them just came off. One of them just broke off. See if I can still land these two. So I've got one. The second one is here. The third one I had came off. Now that one came off. I don't have heavy enough tippet to lift them. I land most of my doubles in lakes where I have tippet that's strong enough I can lift the top fish into the air, get the bottom fish in, and then let my line slip and drop the top fish into the net. In that case, I had a fish on all three hooks. I only got one to the net, but I had two here for a second. And as luck would have it, I did at least land the largest of the bunch. That was a bit of a rodeo. I hooked a fish, lost the fish, took two turns of my reel, came loose, dropped the flies back in there, and got tight to that fish. Ended up with two. Then during the fight right here, a third one ate my middle dropper, and I had all three of them on there. This skinny brown just came out of winter. But swinging wets, it's a good fun reason to fish 3 flies. You might hook 3 at a time. And though I didn't land them, it was fun to have 3 on for just a minute. All right, just high level thoughts here. You always want to fish, obviously, at least 1. I would suggest fishing 2 if regulations allow 2 wet flies. Again, I have 3 on, that's allowed here. Some things to consider: longer leaders, I think, are your friend with this technique. I started with about a 20-inch butt section, an 8-foot leader, then I've added tippet to it. So let's see if we can measure this out. I actually don't know how long my leader is, but I would guess it's in the 15-foot range. Yeah, that's probably about right. It doesn't have to be quite this long. I tend to like long leaders, but you don't want it super, super short for this technique. Especially if you're working flat water for picky fish. Just having the distance between your flies and your fly line for the purpose of impact, separating the impact of your fly line from your flies, will keep you from spooking fish. So that's an advantage. Next up, again, just any weight forward or double taper, regular floating line works. Keep in mind it's best to have softish rods. It doesn't have to be this exact rod, but something that's on the softer end of the spectrum is an advantage. Next, just consider how fast your flies are moving. Most of the time, slower is better. There was 2 bumps right there. Most of the time, moving your flies slow is better than too fast. When they're moving too fast, you just mend to compensate. So if this were faster water, I may have to do more mends across here. More mends that to my left would slow down the swing of my flies, and in this case, more mends to my right would speed up the swing of my flies. You can kind of watch the fly line tip going across there. It's cold water right now. I didn't take a temperature today, but I'll bet it's around 40, maybe 41, 42 degrees. With that in mind, the fish are pretty lethargic. They don't want to chase stuff. They're not looking to move very far. So that's why I'm really trying to make an effort to get my flies deep, and also make an effort to mend to make my rig move slow rather than fast, and just kind of letting it go across the current at a slow speed, pulling all 3 of those flies across there. All right, one more closing thought. With this technique in particular, don't get too upset if you're hooking and or getting strikes and losing fish. That is part of this. It's not a really, really high conversion rate. You're gonna have some fish that bump it, you're not gonna get tight to them. You're gonna have some fish that are hooked, they're gonna come loose. That's okay. It's kind of a fun technique still because you get a lot of action, you get a lot of pulls, a lot of plucks on the line. So if that's happening, just don't let that get you down. Keep at it. There are some little tricks to help you land a few more of them, but plan on missing some of the fish. Not every fish that bumps your fly is going to get tight and get hooked.